everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Heather and today I am here to do the reading tastes tag. I was very kindly tagged by Kaylee of Luminous Libro weeks ago now, but due to being ill and my backlog of videos, I'm finally getting around to it. This was actually a really fun tag. I was a little bit intimidated by it at first because trying to summarize my entire reading taste seemed really difficult. But I think I managed to distill it down. I will always have caveats and extra explanations because that's just me. This tag was also created by Harriet Rosie, so I will link her and Kaylee's channel down below. The first question is to describe your reading taste in one sentence. This was the toughest part. This was the part that intimidated me. And I think I could summarize it by saying that my taste includes cozy, classic journeys into unchanging human nature. To get into that a little bit further, they ask me to describe your reading taste with categories. So I tend to read a lot of classics and a lot of historical fiction, but I also enjoy reading books that involve romance, or sometimes actual romance novels, because we all know there is a difference. Mysteries, not all mysteries, but mysteries that are on the cozier or classic, or indeed historical end of things. Sometimes fantasy. I'm very picky about my fantasies. It has to be very Celtic or Arthurian inspired. Sometimes middle grade. Again, it depends on the plot. And I really don't have a preference as to the length of the book. As long as a book sounds good to me, I will read it, and it doesn't matter how big of a book it is. The next challenge is to show us some books that summarize your reading taste. Of course, I have to start with Jane Austen, and indeed with Shakespeare. These are my two first loves, and they always will be. After that, I started raiding my shelves and pulling off books that I absolutely adore. Things like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which combines the historical and Jane Austen elements with fantasy. Beautiful, stunning, wonderful. There's also the Poldark series, romance, historical, cozy, but also thrilling, 18th to 19th century, perfect. Georgette Heyer novels, as close as we are going to get to getting more Jane Austen novels. Venetia happens to be my particular favorite. Other classics, of course, things like North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, which is Pride and Prejudice, but with Victorian social justice. Little Dorrit, classic sweeping romance, beautiful history, and the biggest deep dive into human nature. Les Liaisons Dangereuses, again, 18th century, and a massive psychological escapade. Sometimes exploring non-fiction topics related to things I love, like the Diaries of Anne Lister. Exploring both the Regency and the period before the Victorians and kind of into the Victorians. Exploring what life was like as a lesbian during that point in history. Generational sagas, giving us so much history all at once through the perspective of one family or families, like Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. The Reluctant Heiress, cozy, historical, beautiful settings that I love, like the city of Vienna, and opera plays a part. Slightly darker and gothic-y historical novels like anything by Sarah Waters, but especially Fingersmith. And cozy, lovely middle grade fantasy like this one, which centers around a love of books, being Pages & Co. by Anna James. Then it asks for books that you didn't enjoy, that you thought would be your taste. And honestly, I couldn't think of any. I had to go back through Goodreads and look for some of my 1-star rated books. I always think I'm going to love Regency romances and forget that they are in fact very hit or miss. For example, I thought I would love Regency Buck by Georgette Heyer. I loved some of Georgette Heyer's other books. I was going to read it while I was in Bath. I thought it was perfect. And it was just dreadful. I found the relationship really manipulative and just almost abusive, and I could not get into it. Something in the Air by Suzanne Enoch was one that I read last year for Jane Austen July, and it just felt so contrived, really, I don't want to say really poorly written, but it could have been written so much better. And I just couldn't do it. The relationship just did not convince me. I wanted to love In Defense of Witches by Mona Chalet. I'm never sure how to pronounce her last name. Witchy things fascinate me. The history of witch trials I find disturbing but also intriguing. And I love books that explore historical feminism or proto-feminism. However, this book is in fact about modern feminist issues and how we are still being treated as witches, which, knowing what I know about witch trials, is just not true. She took that metaphor a little bit too far, in my opinion. They are indeed problems that need to be addressed, but I don't think we've reached witch trial stages yet. And finally, there was the book Among the Janeites by, I think, Deborah Yaffe, I'm not sure, which I wanted to love. I am a Janeite. I wanted to see an outsider's perspective, and the first chapter did nothing but make fun of us. Make fun of how we dress up for events and all the Jane Austen plastered everywhere, and I just found it rather insulting. Question 5 asks, what is a book that you loved that you didn't think would be your taste? And I have to say, I didn't think I would love The Color Purple as much as I did. It's relatively contemporary and American, and I don't tend to love American novels, especially contemporary ones. It is extremely dark, and honestly, I didn't think I would be able to get through it. But I loved it. I loved Celi's voice. I loved the passion in this. I loved the spirituality that was woven throughout, even though it was so incredibly dark. And it's just so beautiful and moving. And every time I hear the final song of the musical, I cry. It's just so perfect. I also didn't think I'd love A Room of One's Own as much as I do, purely because I don't always get on with Virginia Woolf's writing. So I wasn't entirely sure how nonfiction by her was going to go, but I loved it. I found it so well structured. It was really wonderful. Question 6 asks me to show you some books on my TBR that I think are going to be exactly my taste. So I had a rummage, and this is a random assortment of books that I hope I'm going to love. Obviously, I think that about most of the books on my TBR, but especially these. First, I picked up Sepulchre by Kate Moss. Yes, I have to read Labyrinth first, but this one in particular I think I'm really going to love, because not only is it historical, and it's a big saga, there may or may not be a mystery, but I believe Debussy is involved in this. And I actually listened to a podcast episode where Kate Moss put in her 2 cents about his opera Pelléas et Mélisande, because she had so much knowledge about Debussy from writing this book. So I'm really intrigued to see what this is going to be like. I also think I'm going to love the play Blue Stockings by Jessica Swale. I read her play about Nell Gwyn a few years ago and I loved it. And this play is about some of the first women to be admitted to Girton College in Cambridge. And I think that sounds amazing. I have heard nothing but wonderful things about The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton. It's fantasy, but historical fantasy set in New Zealand. It just sounds fabulous. Antoinette's Sister by Diana Giovinazzo just sounds fabulous. Again, historical fiction, 18th century, a underrepresented figure from history. The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell, same deal as Antoinette's Sister, and I already know that I like Maggie O'Farrell's writing. I am cheating with a few known authors here, like the last book in the Pages & Co. series by Anna James, the Emily series by L.M. Montgomery. I did read the first one, but I have to reread it and then read the second and third. A Pair of Blue Eyes is a Thomas Hardy that I haven't read, and I think I've come out of the super dark end of his writing, so I'm hoping that I love this as well. And Roz and Kate Howe are really convincing me to try Aurora Lee at some point. I don't always enjoy poetry, but if there's a narrative flow to it, I think I might like it a little bit better. Plus, having this cover stare at me every day off the top of the pile is almost persuasive. Question 7 asks, name a booktuber you think has similar taste to you. Honestly, I think there are a lot of them out there. I tend to follow a lot of people with similar reading tastes to me. If you're looking for specifics, of course, many classics booktubers like Marissa at Blatantly Bookish, or Kate Howe, or Katie at Books and Things, Megan the Story Girl, also Claire Fenby, anyone in that general range. Question 8 asks, have you always had this taste in books, or has it changed over time? I don't think it's changed very much. I've always been drawn to historical books. I've always loved classics. I did read more fantasy when I was younger, but as you've seen, I still enjoy a little bit of fantasy. I've just refined my taste in that area a little bit. And question 9 is to tag some people to also show off their reading tastes. I'm always terrible at this. I am terrible at knowing who has already been tagged to do this tag. So I'm going to tag 3 people that I don't think have been picked to do it yet, who are Marissa at Blatantly Bookish, Kate Howe, and Megan the Story Girl. And beyond that, I will also open it up to any of you who also have channels and would also like to do this tag. I hope this has been illuminating, interesting, and I'll see you all soon in a new video. Until next time, be safe, be well, and happy reading. Bye everyone.